Spice Math. That's right. We add it up, multiply it, man. Spice Math. Okay. A couple things we're gonna learn today. Spice Math. All right. Take some time, educate yourself. Spice Math. That's right. You won't believe it's just math. Come on.
Hi, I'm Ruth Doughton.
Hi, I'm Aaron Williams.
Hi, I'm Brandon Alexander.
Hi, I'm Kelvin Doughton.
Hello, I'm Lyndon Sincere.
We are your Spice Math tutors.
You won't believe it's just math. Just math.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another session of Spice Math, and welcome to the second part of the Discovering Your Calculator series. Today we'll be talking about the use of the root and power functions of your calculators. We'll now be switching over to a calculator on a screen so I can demonstrate certain uses of the calculator. Okay, so this is the second part to our little calculator series, Discovering Your Calculator. And today we'll be dealing with powers and roots. I would like you to look at your calculator and identify a button which has something like x squared. On my calculator, it happens to be a button that is exactly x squared, but it may be something else on your calculator. This button can be used to square any number you would like. So, if you input 36, for example, and you press the button that we just identified, then you press the equal sign, it will return 1296, which is 36 squared, 36 by 36. There should also be a button that looks like X with a box or a blank space where the power should be. This is that button on my calculator. This will allow you to input any number into that blank space. So, if you would like to find the cube of 5, or 5 to the 3, you would simply input 5 and press this particular button, which would make a blank space appear above the 5, and you would input the number 3, and once you press equal, the calculator will return the cube of 5, or 5 to the power of 3, which is the same thing as 5 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 5, and the answer for that is 125. In part 1 of this series, we spoke about brackets, and brackets also come into play when dealing with powers. You can be asked to find the square, for example, of a negative number, and this would require the use of a bracket. For example, give the value of negative 2 squared. If you input this in your calculator as negative 2 squared, you will get negative 4 as your answer. And this will be incorrect. The square of negative 2 is indeed positive 4. This is because negative 2 squared is the same as minus 2 or negative 2 multiplied by negative 2. And when you multiply a negative by a negative, the outcome is always positive. When you input it, as I mentioned before, the calculator will process this as you just wanted to square the 2 and put a negative sign in front of it. To do this correctly in your calculator, you would have to use brackets. It would look like this. It would have to be input like this. And this is where your calculator would return the correct answer of positive 4, because the square sign now applies to the entire bracket. On to square roots. I'd like you to look at your calculator and identify a button which has something like the square root of x, or the square root of a blank space as it appears on my calculator. Now don't be alarmed if you don't see a 2 on this button, because when there's no number in this little space here in a root sign, it is assumed or understood that there is a 2 there. This button can be used to find the square root of any number you would like. The square root of a number is simply a value that when multiplied by itself gives back the same number. So if you press the button and then input 100 under the sign, for example, and you press equal, it will return 10, which is the square root of 100, because if we multiply 10 by 10, we'll get back our original value of 100. There should be another button or a second function symbol on your calculator that looks like a square root sign, but with a 3 where the 2 is, or a 3 in that space where I mentioned the 2 is assumed to be. On my calculator, it's a second function button, and the cursor of the mouse is pointed to it right now. But on your calculator, it may be a completely separate button. So this is known as a cube root sign. The cube root of a number is simply a value that when multiplied by itself twice gives you back the original value. So for example, the cube root of 125 is 5, because if you multiply 5 by 5 by 5, you'll get 125. So if you press this button, for example, and remember, in the first part, we spoke about how to access the second functions. We hit the shift button and we press the button with the appropriate second function above it. You see that we have a cube root sign has appeared. If we input 216 under this cube root sign, for example, and we press equal, then the calculator will return 6. And this is because 6 is the cube root of 216, meaning that 6 multiplied by 6 multiplied by 6 is 216. There should also be a symbol that looks like a square root sign, but with a box or a blank space where the number 2 should be, or where I said that it's assumed to be. This is usually accessed by using the second function or shift feature again. This will allow you to input any number in the blank space where the 2 usually is in a square root. On my calculator, this second function is found above this button where the cursor is pointed. So again, to access the second function, we hit our shift button and press the appropriate button with the suitable second function above it. So now I have a root sign where there's a blank space where the 2 usually is in a square root sign, and a blank space under our root sign. So, for example, if you would like to find the fourth root of 625, you would simply enter a 4 where the 2 usually is in a square root sign. So you see we have a 4 in the appropriate place to find the fourth root. And under the root sign, we would enter 625. And once we hit equal, the result will be 5, because the fourth root of 625 is 5, which means that 5 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 5, so that's 4 times. Let me just demonstrate that on the calculator. 5 by 5 by 5 by 5 is equal to 625. And here you have used this function to find the fourth root of 625. Okay, students, so that brings us to the end of our second session on discovering your calculator. I want to encourage you to keep practicing and keep getting to know your calculator better, because this is the only way that your math will become as efficient as possible. So, please look forward to the next part of the Discovering Your Calculator series, where we'll discuss using your calculator even further.
You won't believe it's just math. Come on. You won't believe it's just math.